Welcome to The Critique. Today we are looking at a passionate, faith-driven political commentary warning a conservative audience and the former president about the perceived dangers of recent foreign policy decisions and massive foreign.
Thanks for having me, and yeah, it's a really intense piece.
It is. It has this incredible truth-teller ethos right out of the gate, like someone taking a solemn oath on a witness stand. But to maintain that grip, we need to dive right into our first piece of feedback regarding the structure and flow.
Streamlining the narrative by tightening these ideological tangents will significantly amplify the core warning regarding the foreign policy.
Right. Because right now, keeping that courtroom intensity, it requires just an absolutely unrelenting narrative drive.
And the side narratives are actively killing that momentum. The script frequently diverges from its three main red flags into these extended side stories.
Yeah, like deep into personal backstories.
Exactly. We get this really substantial detour into the speaker's past and the New Age movement. We get a lengthy anecdote involving Candace Owens and Hollywood. And then there's an extensive breakdown of the commentator Lucas Gage and his specific political awakening.
Right, which, they're compelling stories in a vacuum.
Oh, totally. But here, they act as dead weights on the primary argument. We're supposed to be focusing on the president's actions and the geopolitical situation in Syria and this massive Qatar investment.
And every time the script hits pause on those stakes to analyze someone's personal journey, the tension just evaporates. It's like, think of it like reading a high-stakes thriller.
Right.
If the protagonist is navigating a maze or trying to defuse a bomb, he shouldn't stop to admire the wall carvings. It doesn't matter how beautifully written a detour is. The audience is screaming, cut the wire.
Cut the wire, exactly. So the suggestion here is to condense or reposition these ideological detours so they serve as rapid, supporting analogies rather than full narrative breaks. This keeps the audience entirely focused on the immediate geopolitical stake.
So how do we do that? Like, concretely, if I'm the author and I feel the Lucas Gage story is vital, how do I keep it without stopping the clock?
Well, instead of detailing the entire Lucas Gage Damascus Road experience, you just summarize it in a single sentence. You use it as an example of overcoming confirmation bias, and then immediately link it back to the audience's need to evaluate the Qatar investment receipts.
Ah, I see. So it becomes a springboard instead of a roadblock.
Exactly. And you do the exact same thing with the New Age background story. Trim it down to a brief passing clause. So instead of a full paragraph about being an agent of darkness, you say something like, just as I had to wake up from New Age deceptions, we must wake up to this foreign policy reality.
Wow. Yeah, that really speeds things up. But let me ask you this. Is there a risk that by cutting these personal anecdotes, the author loses the relatable, I've been there connection with the listener?
I understand that concern, but it's really about distillation, not deletion. The connection actually remains. When you use that passing clause, you're still confessing your past, but the velocity of your argument increases. You get the vulnerability without paying the tax of a ruined pace.
That makes total sense. And once the pacing is tightened and those detours are cleared out, the spotlight naturally falls onto the core evidence, which means that evidence has to be flawlessly constructed.
It does. Grounding the most alarming financial claims in clear, step-by-step logic will prevent the audience's natural skepticism from overriding the argument.
Because we hit a pretty massive structural crack during the introduction of the Qatari investment claim, right?
A massive one, yeah. The author introduces this staggering $19 trillion claim, but in the very same breath notes that Qatar's GDP is only around $24 to $29 billion.
Which is just a canyon of a gap.
It is. And throwing out the 19 trillion number and comparing it to Elon Musk, by the way, without instant logical scaffolding, it causes the claim to feel completely untethered. It risks the analytical listener's trust.
Yeah, my brain literally halted when I read it. You hear 19 trillion, then 29 billion, and the math just refuses to compute.
Right. And then you stop listening to all the disastrous outcomes the author is warning about because you're stuck 5 sentences back trying to solve an arithmetic problem.
The cognitive dissonance is loud. So how do we restructure this?
You have to structure the presentation of these major claims by first introducing the figure, then immediately addressing the audience's expected skepticism about that GDP gap and laying out the precise mechanism before listing the outcomes.
So in practice, as soon as that $19 trillion figure drops, you follow up instantly with an explanation. Like, now you might wonder how a nation with a 29 billion GDP does this. They pull from the entire Arab League coffers.
Yes, exactly. That solves it instantly. Their skepticism is anticipated and resolved, and the brain can keep moving forward. Also, as a quick side note, remove the NPC in a video game insult in this specific section.
Oh yeah, that felt a little out of place given the gravity of $19 trillion.
It actively undermines the argument. Let the gravity of the financial evidence stand alone, without distracting the listener with insults aimed at detractors. It just lowers the stakes.
Okay, so that mechanism of anticipating skepticism, does that same rule apply to the geopolitical arguments later in the text? I'm looking at the section regarding El-Gilani, the Syrian president, and Hezbollah.
100%, perhaps even more so because foreign policy is so murky. Right now, the connections between all these factions, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, the IRGC, they're thrown at the listener incredibly quickly.
It's a total alphabet soup of acronyms. If I don't implicitly understand the friction between an ex-Al-Qaeda operative and an IRGC proxy, the terror of the situation just doesn't land.
Exactly. So slowing down to firmly establish why sending one faction to deal with another is catastrophic will anchor the argument much better. Step-by-step logic works for finance, and it is vital for Middle Eastern foreign policy.
Got it. Okay. So we've got the evidence sharply framed and logically bullet. The final and arguably most crucial step is ensuring this weaponized argument is pointed precisely at the right target.
Clarifying the primary recipient of the message will elevate the emotional climax and ensure the call to action lands with maximum impact. Right now, the material suffers from a severely split rhetorical focus.
Yeah, it oscillates wildly. On one page, we have this direct, loving, pastoral plea to the president. You know, Mr. President, I love you.
Right?
And then it pivots into a harsh, aggressive rebuke of conspiracy theorists and the woke right. The language shifts to phrases like, you are arrogant and you are delusional.
It's a huge tonal whiplash. By the end, I genuinely didn't know my role. Am I overhearing a prayer for a national leader, or am I getting a scolding about being cooked? Which is why the suggestion is to choose one primary rhetorical frame. It needs to be either an open letter directly addressing the leader or a stark warning to the conservative base. You then filter all secondary critiques through that chosen lens to maintain the author's intent of a prophetic warning.
Okay, let's workshop that. Say they go with the open letter format. How do they handle the frustration toward the woke right audience without turning the camera away from the president?
You frame the critique of the woke right as the bad advice the president is receiving. You phrase it like, Mr. President, you are being misled by voices in our own movement who are pushing these distractions. You don't yell directly at the audience.
That's brilliant. It keeps the pastoral tone but still lands the criticism. And what if they choose the warning to the base?
Then you change the direct addresses to the president into third-person observations about his spiritual and political vulnerability. You just remind the listener that he's being led astray. These are just two potential paths to unify the tone.
I want to push back on this just a little bit. Specifically regarding the biblical rhetoric, the author uses some profound references like Ezekiel 37 and the Mount of Olives. Doesn't that kind of grand scriptural framework inherently serve both audiences? Like it warns the flock and pleads with the king?
I see why you'd think that, but the biblical framing is actually the script's superpower. And precisely because it is so powerful, deciding who exactly is supposed to be convicted by that scripture will make the author's intent resonate much more deeply.
How do you mean?
Well, think about prophetic voices in the text. Is the author acting as Nathan, confronting King David, demanding the leader recognize his misstep? Or are they acting as Jeremiah, weeping over a city that lost its way? If you try to convict the king and the crowd simultaneously, the audience assumes you're talking to the president, and the president assumes you're talking to the crowd.
Ah, if you aim at everyone, you hit no one. No one takes the conviction personally.
Exactly. The passion here is incredible. It just needs the structural discipline to match it.
All right, to concisely recap our 3 actionable pillars today. First, streamline the ideological tangents to keep the pacing relentless. Second, scaffold those staggering financial statistics so the logic holds up to scrutiny. And third, unify the rhetorical target to deliver a cohesive emotional climax.
Implementing those will really elevate the whole piece.
We want to warmly thank the author for submitting such a courageous and deeply personal piece of commentary. Please
take these suggestions, and we invite you to submit your revised work or any future materials back to the critique for further exploration.
We'd love to read it. Thanks for listening.